Welcome to another edition of Chew Chats, where plant-based eating takes the mic. Let's find out who our expert and topic are for today.
So today we're going to find out what is the good news and the bad news with Dr. Dulaney. And Dr. Dulaney, would you tell us how all this started, that you ended up having to share this information with us in our Chew Chat?
Well, I am a prolific reader, and I like to learn from as many different people as I can. And often I will get an email from a member that says, have you read a certain book? Have you read a certain book? And so there was this member named Kathy Thornhill that said, hey, have you read this book, Burn? And it's like, no. And I thought, oh, is that going to be another one of those diet books on, eat this, don't eat that, and it won't have any references. So I was like, I'll check it out. I'll check it out. So I got the book and I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. And it is a fascinating book. It's written by Herman Pontzer, who is a PhD at Duke University, and he has been studying, and he's basically anthropology, but in the form of metabolism. And he has lived with a true hunter-gatherer tribe in Africa called the Hadza's. He has studied orangutans and chimpanzees and gorillas, both in the wild and in captivity. He studied Tour de France cyclists, couch potatoes, Wall Street people, pregnant people, and looked at metabolism. And he's found some very earth-shattering news that, I think some people in my class, in my nutrition class, got a little depressed over to some degree. But there are some good news. There is some good news as well.
Well, before we get started, why don't you explain to us you told me how strong the metabolism section of the book was. What is metabolism, and more about how he studied it?
Well, most of us, when we say metabolism, I have a fast metabolism, I have a slow metabolism. If we tend to be overweight, we think we have a slow metabolism. If somebody's really tall and skinny, and they must have a fast metabolism. And we think that when we get closer to menopause, our metabolism slows down. And if there's all kinds of books out there. What can we do with our metabolism? There's even things, I was researching on Thanksgiving dinner, and how much time would you have to be on a treadmill to burn off or increase or burn off the metabolism of a Thanksgiving dinner. But it's not quite as simple. When we talk about metabolism, it's our body's use of energy, which is very different than nutrition. Because we can talk metabolism, we can talk nutrition. They don't necessarily overlap. But when we look at just burning energy and having enough energy to stay alive and energy to maintain a healthy body weight, there are two things come to mind: a basal metabolic rate. And that's, what does your body burn when you're just sitting in a chair or when you're lying in bed at night, just breathing? How much energy are your liver using, your heart's using, your skin's using? Your brain is using? That's our basal metabolic rate. And then we have something called total energy expenditure for the day. So when you go out for your walk, or when you're stressed, if you're studying, the whole day, what is that? And most of us, including myself, have thought of this total energy expenditure. So if I have a basal metabolic rate of blank, so if say, typically we would guess if you weigh 120 pounds, your basal metabolic rate is somewhere around 1,200 calories you burn just sitting around. That was what I would give in the past as far as an average. And then say I went for a 5-mile run, so I could add, so if I run 10 miles at 100 calories, that's 1,000 calories. The question is, do I get to add that on to my basal metabolic rate plus walking around, or is there just one thing? And so that's where this book starts to take a deep dive, is what can we do to affect our metabolism? What can we affect? Is our daily metabolic rate different? Is yours different from mine? Is a hunter-gatherer different from a Tour de France cyclist? And that's where this starts to deep dive into.
And what did he find out about exercise and weight loss? Because you say, well, I've got a slow metabolism and I have to exercise more, but what did he really discover about that?
Right. So he used a unique, most metabolism studies, most nutritional studies, we take in caloric intakes, we give people questionnaires, how much did you eat in a day? You keep a dietary log, and then somebody figures out how many calories you ate, how many calories you burn. Sometimes people are, there's weight, there's body fat mass index, all these different things. But what he did was he actually used a technique called water labeling. So when we breathe, we metabolize food, we basically excrete carbon dioxide and water. And so by labeling it, he could actually measure the urinary loss, the carbon dioxide loss, and figure out exactly how many calories people were burning in a day, both at rest and with exercise. And he followed and lived with these hot hunter-gatherers. He again followed Tour de France cyclists. They even did a 5-day study a study where they followed people that cycled across America and looked at their energy expenditure. And what he found was very unique was that humans, we have a metabolic rate that stays pretty steady. So from age 0 to 20, when we're growing and developing, we have a very high metabolic rate because we're building muscle every day. We're growing and things. And after 20, when we stop growing, things pretty much level off. And then when we're 60, it starts to decline a little bit. But in that 20 to 60-year-old age group, no matter whether we're a hunter-gatherer or a Tour de France athlete or a couch potato, for your lean body mass, a woman or a man, different for women and men, just because of overall muscle and bone structure, there is a daily energy expenditure that's pretty consistent. So if I were to run 10 miles on Monday and not run it all on Tuesday, my energy expenditure would not change that much, even though I said before, it's like, well, if I do 100 calories per mile, is that 1,000 calories extra that I have that I can eat? It's not, because the other things that control our energy expenditure, how much energy did my liver use, my brain use, my stomach use, our body tends to dial that back. So it preserves energy, because to live is to have enough energy and not starve to death. So as we have evolved to live, our main purpose is to live long enough to reproduce. And so we have to maintain people that get a certain amount of calories in, maintain a certain body mass, are more successful than not. So the whole idea of life basically is to be able to control this metabolic rate so that we're fairly consistent and not these big up and down plateaus. Mm-hmm. So when he started looking, again, there wasn't a whole lot of difference. Maybe there's like a 200-300 calorie variation. So when we talk about, okay, I'm going to exercise so I can eat a donut, or I'm going to exercise to get rid of weight, that really doesn't happen, because our body is going to adjust in various ways so that we're really not going to get this, I'm not going to, be on the treadmill and run off that Blizzard milkshake of 1,000 calories. It just doesn't work that way.
And he puts this in a quote. He says, the bottom line is that our daily activity level has almost no bearing on the number of calories we burn each day. And when I heard you explain it, I thought, okay, well, that's sort of like we've got $2,500 to spend. And if we spend too much on this, we're going to take it from that. We rob Peter to pay Paul. Is that kind of like what you're talking about? Correct.
If I'm burning a lot of calories with my leg muscles by walking or running, then I'm not taking in food. So my gut doesn't have to burn calories to do digestive processes. I'm not making a bunch of enzymes there. And I thought one of the things that was very, very fascinating was that one of the times in a woman's life that she has a tremendously high energy expenditures during pregnancy. So you're growing another human being at the same time. So you're literally eating for two, but you're also burning for two.
Oh.
And so the energy expenditure is very, very high, almost the highest that it ever is in life, even higher than that 0 to 20, or at least equivalent to that. And that there may be some evidence that the onset of labor comes at a time when the woman is no longer able to take enough energy in and absorb it to take care of two bodies. And that stimulates, okay, it's like, okay, you got to move out here, baby, and we're going to feed you some other way. And that brings up, even in athletics, if you look at some of the Tour de France, if anybody follows that, or endurance, I like to run ultra marathons. What stops somebody? Why can't they just keep going on at a very, very high level? And it's the ability to actually absorb calories. So no matter how much you put in, Michael Phelps, there's a couple things out there where, he ate, he was quoted eating like 10,000 calories a day. And it's like, well, you can eat it, but your body can only absorb about 2 to 3 times that basal that basal activity, that total average daily energy expenditure for your lean body mass. You might be able to absorb 2 or 3 times that, but you can't go over it. So when somebody out exercises the ability to absorb, then they shut down. Just like when somebody overeats, then basically those calories are stored as storage, fat storage.
Mm-hmm.
So our metabolism is always adjusting to maintain status quo.
Okay, so exercise doesn't change the calories that we burn. And he says it makes all the difference what we do actually spend our calories on. So how are we spending our calories? What can exercise do for us if it's not helping us lose weight?
Right. So when you exercise, your heart beats faster, your blood vessels dilate, your muscles become stronger. One of the things that does is it decreases inflammation. It makes our blood vessels more pliable. We deliver more nutrients to our body when our heart rate goes up and our blood vessels dilate. But the other thing that happens is when we exercise is we maintain or eventually can even build a little bit muscle. But it's mainly, when we're looking at, the 40 plus age group, we're really in the, we like to maintain the muscle mass that we have. So we don't have this big drop at 60 to start to climb, because our muscles they contain little organelles. The cells in our body contain little organelles called mitochondria. And those are the energy metabolizing units of the body, the boiler room of our cells, basically. So when you lose muscle, you lose mitochondria. And when you lose mitochondria, you lose the ability to metabolize and to use energy. And when you can't use energy, then bad things start to happen.
Yeah. On that reducing inflammation, I love that passage in the book where he talks about if you're so inflamed, it's like the fire department comes and they just don't go home. I mean, they just keep causing chaos in your body. And is that kind of what happens when we have too much leisure time and don't exercise and don't dial down that inflammation?
We don't, yeah. And, of course, what we eat also plays a huge role in inflammation. But again, just if you were to break your leg and to go to bed, and these studies have been done, you take young 20-year-olds and you put them to bed. They've done it with astronauts at zero gravity. You can lose 10, 12% of your muscle mass in a very short period of time. On the other hand, it's going to take 6 to 9 months of vigorous strength training to put it back on. So it comes off, the muscle comes down a lot easier than it goes back on. So when people go to these clinics and they say, oh, I know your weight hasn't gone down, but you probably put on some muscle. It's probably not true. But so when we lose muscle and we lose blood vessels and we don't supply our body with nutrients, basically it's like a car. You can have a Tesla car and it sits in your driveway and you never take it out. Those tires are going to become flat on the bottom. The hoses are still going to go bad. So if we're not using things, if we're not keeping, oxygenating and moving and eliminating waste, then we're accumulating those waste.
Yeah. And what about stress? Does exercise help us reduce stress?
Absolutely. One of the best ways to combat depression, and it's actually been shown as good or better than any antidepressant or anxiety medications, is exercise. When you're moving your body, again, you're actually generating endorphins, which are feel-good hormones. You're improving oxygenation to your brain. Typically, you're taking your mind off your troubles somewhat if you're out and you're in a different environment or you're interacting with other people. So all that goes to decrease negative stress. And we always say that increased stress can cause a heart attack, and increased stress leads to anxiety. Increased stress is bad, bad, bad. But we also have to remember that some of the best things that we do and are associated with stress. The stress of having our families over for Thanksgiving, the stress of having a new grandchild, the stress of being up all night with a new child, all these things that bring us great joy also bring us some stress. And so it's not all necessarily bad. And just like, being exposed to viruses and bacteria, we have to exercise our mental stress in our mental aptitudes, as well as our, inflammatory aptitudes a little bit.
What about this thing that he mentions about keeping healthy levels of estrogen? He says that exercise is one of the most effective ways to reduce the risk of cancer of reproductive systems. How does exercise keep those hormones levels healthier?
Well, if you just go, if we look at people as we age, hormone levels tend to go down, both in men and women. And estrogen levels tend to dip. And of course, we thought giving people estrogen would keep them young, giving people testosterone would keep them young. But it also turns out that they're very much aging hormones. They're hard on our vascular levels. They're estrogen. They stimulate growths of cells that maybe we don't want to grow. There's a change in vascular and endothelial reactivity that hormones may be negative on. So our body kind of knows the levels that it should have around, and exercise actually helps to keep those levels in check, so that we have enough hormones that we function appropriately, but not too much that we're actually stimulate the growth of abnormal cells.
In other words, our body doesn't work too hard because it doesn't have anything to do and make too much estrogen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, these reproductive hormones were meant for reproduction. And when there's not a human to grow, then we're going to grow something else, perhaps.
Yeah. So exercise helps with that. Now, the biggie keeps you sharp mentally. Now, how does that work?
Well, there's been some interesting studies done with nursing home patients that just taking people in a nursing home and doing cognitive assessments and then putting them through a strength training program designed to increase leg strength. So squats, lunges, leg exercises to build thigh, glute, core type of exercises, and then repeating those mental tests actually have shown improvement. Again, when you're stronger, gravity, we have to get gravity feeds our head blood, right? Or we have to pump blood to our head. Gravity can get blood down, but to get it up, we have to have some pumping ability. The stronger your legs are, again, the more it assists in the movement of blood, the movement of lymph, the elimination of toxins, the elimination of inflammation. And that all works to keep us more mentally sharp. It's, again, perfusion. We've got to perfuse our head and all those little blood vessels. They tend to get, the little blood vessels that we have everywhere, whether it's in our head or our fingertips, or any place else tend to get diseased and show some wear and tear over time. But again, to be able to pump blood to those by increasing our heart rate, increasing hormones that help dilate blood vessels is protective for your brain as well as the rest of your body.
Use it or lose it. With your brain, you got to have arteries that are working as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you talked about mitochondria and how exercise impacts our mitochondria. And you talked about this thing with muscle and fat. And, exercise, obviously, we know can give us muscles, but keeping it from turning into fat. Now, this was a chart you had the other day in one of the nutrition classes. And boy, it says a lot right there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was, this was from the CDC, and it looks at, when we look at sarcopenia, means muscle loss. And if you look at the age group, both in women and men, there tends to be a huge muscle loss starting, in the 40s, basically, and then becoming, so the percentage of people in their 80 plus or even 70 plus with a significant muscle loss is significantly. And this slide was associated with, less than 20%. It's more like 15% of people, in the 60 plus age group get adequate exercise in order to maintain muscle mass. So, this all goes back to the decline we see in people after age 60, when everybody says the wheels start to fall off. And I thought the book was really interesting because, I have observed over the years that menopause plays cruel tricks on women. You see this big 20, 30 pound weight gain in a lot of women. If you haven't seen some of your high school friends or your college friends, and all of a sudden you see them, it's like, oh, they put on some weight. And the question is, and everybody blames it on menopause because it's around that time, that 40 to 60, we'll say. But in Herman Pontzer's book, 40 to 60, the metabolism, the daily energy expenditure really doesn't change. So what is changing in those people is the amount of energy that they're taking in. So again, they're able to take in, as they're absorbing the energy because they're under that 3 times their basal metabolic rate, but they're taking in significantly more calories. So if you take in 100 extra calories a day, then that's, that's over 3,600 calories or 10 is 3,600. There's 36,000 calories. So we're talking 10 pounds a year with 100 calories a day extra. So, that's it. And it's not menopause that does it. It's basically more time on your hands, more time to eat out, more time not to exercise, and then this muscle mass starts to play a role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, boy, that's telling. Now, this was interesting to me. He said that exercise is a poor tool for achieving weight loss. And I've got to keep thinking that's not going to help us lose weight, but it does help us maintain weight loss. So, we've had people in our group who've lost a lot of weight. How does exercise help them maintain their weight loss?
He alluded to a couple studies that were, or a couple different things that, exercise, again, maintains our muscle mass, maintains our mitochondria, maintains our ability to use energy, but it doesn't burn excess of calories off. There was a study done with policemen. They had a group that lost 30 pounds or 50, I think they lost 50 pounds and didn't exercise, and a group that lost 50 pounds and they kept them exercising. The group that exercised maintained that weight loss, where the group that lost the weight regained the weight. And he attributed this to, again, when you lose weight, your body wants to hang on to it. So if you've creeped up to that 200 pound mark and your normal weight might be 150 pounds, or that's maybe where you were in college, and you drop that 50 pounds to get to that 150, your body's still saying, I like the 200. That 200 is very protective against starvation. We like that 200. We like having the extra storage units. And so we're going to try to hang on to it at all costs. And so again, we're going to dial back that basal metabolic rate to try to hang on to these calories. Only with the exercise are you able to maintain that extra, that just to keep things in balance, so to speak, so that you don't shift up. the show The Biggest Loser, they had them exercise 5, 6, 8 hours a day, weight loss. They put them on a low calorie diet, 800 calories a day. And they lost, 100, 200 pounds. And almost all of them, I think all of them except 2 over, 8 seasons, gained all their weight back plus. Because when they dialed back their caloric intake so much, their basal metabolic rate shifted down because they were starving. And so when they quit exercising, they basically are in a hibernation. So they're going to hang on to every bit of fuel that they took in to try to get back to where they were, because their body perceived what had been done to them as being in a starvation state. So only those that really continued that vigorous exercise were able to hold the weight gain from coming back on. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, it is sad. It's very sad. So exercise doesn't make us lose weight, but how can we control our weight? And you talked to us about that in some of your podcasts. What kinds of things can we do to lose weight?
So he goes back to, we have 200 to 300 calories a day to play with for the most part. Maybe some, and that's part of the research that he admits that, we don't know all the answers to, is how much do we have to play with every day? Is 200 extra going to make us gain, 200 extra going to make us lose, or is it 300? Is it 10? Where is that ideal? Where's that sweet spot that will allow us to either control our weight or to gradually lose weight without tanking our metabolism? And so it's really about staying within that 200 to 300 calories that we really want to do. And that's a bit individual. So, what we talk to people about is, what are you doing now? And now it comes back to, like you showed the slide with the money. You have so much money to spend. We have so many calories to spend, but it's more about just how much we weigh. It's about our overall health and well-being. So we have to supply our body with macronutrients, which is not hard: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. We can do that easily. Micronutrients, then we start talking about phytochemistry, phytochemicals, antioxidants, fiber, vitamins, minerals. So how do we get those all in? A 1,200 calorie Twinkie diet is not the same as a 1,200 calorie plant-based diet. As far as nutrition, as far as energy goes, not that much difference, but nutrition wise. So we want to be able to spend that energy in a way that keeps us healthy, as well as we keep our weight under control. So really, we're not looking to do some drastic change. It's more about getting rid of the fluff. So, when we get rid of the fluff, obviously junk food, if you get rid of the chips, and the example that really drove it home for me was one of our members is in his late 80s, and he was starting to have a significant decline in his health. And it was mainly because he kind of fell off the plant-based diet. He just really wanted to eat the way he wanted to do. And, who can blame? He's 88, he gets to choose, right? But he also wants to live to be 100. So he comes in and his health is starting to markedly deteriorate. And he's put on weight, and his glucose is out of control, and blood pressure is up, and, all these kind of things. And it's like, well, if we could get you to go back to that plant-based diet, I think we could get you feeling better. So let's give it a shot. So he agreed, and his wife agreed to, start, laying the law down a little bit, so to speak. And so not drastic. We just want you to go back to that plant-based diet. So about 7 weeks later, he comes walking in. He doesn't have his walker anymore. He's spry. He's starting to work out in the yard again. And he's down, in about 8 weeks, he's down about 7 pounds, and he's 88 years old. So obviously he's not running 10 miles a day. And so I said, so, how did you do it? We went years here without you losing a pound, and you're actually gaining weight, but now you turned it around, and in 2 months you've lost 7 pounds. What's different? And I kind of wanted to pin him to the wall, and I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted him to say it. Because everybody always says they can't lose weight because they're not exercising. And obviously he wasn't exercising because he didn't feel good enough to at first. And so he said, well, I'm eating quinoa. And it's like, so you didn't eat quinoa before? And he said, well, I ate rice. And I said, so you like quinoa less? You're eating less quinoa than rice? Because they're both a grain, and the caloric density of both of them are pretty similar. So It's hard to believe that he lost 7 pounds. It's not a magic weight loss food, right? So I said, what else? And he kind of thought, and I said, come on, what else? And he said, well, I'm not eating the sugar-free ice cream, because we all think sugar-free means calorie-free, right? So you can eat all you want of that stuff. Well, not true, because if it's sugar-free, that means it has to have something. So it has extra fat in it, obviously. So it's a calorie that it's energy that he didn't need. So he cut his bowl of ice cream out that he had, or his couple scoops. And because he told me he wasn't eating very much of it. So it's like, what else? Well, the cookies or the crackers, so I don't have them in the afternoon anymore. So basically, this 88-year-old, fairly sedentary gentleman lost 7 pounds in 8 weeks by eliminating a cereal bowl size of food that wasn't really providing him any significant nutrients. So he lost the crackers, he lost the ice cream. He might have been eating a little less rice or quinoa because he didn't like the quinoa as much, but it wasn't a tremendous reduction in calories. So I always tell people, let's look for the fluff first. Can you get the potato chips out, the junk, the ice cream out? Can you, or substitute, a piece of fruit for that? Because again, it's, we're going to eliminate a few. Can you cut the oil out of your diet? Because oil is 9 calories per gram. So if there's a bunch of cooking oil in the skillet that doesn't provide you anything, cutting that out may eliminate, that might be your cereal bowl full of calories right then and there, and the weight might come off. So I always look for the things that are least painful to eliminate first. I don't want to have to get up from the table too awful hungry, or hungry at all for that matter. I want to be satisfied and enjoy my meals, but what's the fluff that I can cut out? And that's really what we're looking for, not, and that's the reason why, weight loss or Weight Watchers or some of those programs, they tell you that you can eat anything, but they control the energy intake, but they don't necessarily control the nutrient intake. So we want it both ways. We want to get rid of the fluff, maintain the nutrients, but have enough caloric or energy decrease that we can lose weight and make people their ideal body weight.
Wow, that sounds great. And the traditional way is that we starve ourselves. And you alluded to that with the Biggest Losers. I mean, they had reduced their calories so much. And I always remember Dr. McDougall's Maximum Weight Loss book, and how he talks about women and how they're so good at conserving energy, because their role is as the one who's going to have the baby. What happens to our metabolism if we just say, okay, well, I'm not going to try to just get rid of the fluff. I'm just going to quit getting so much food. What will that do to our diet?
Well, if you, again, severely, so you have that 200 to 300 calorie window to play with. If you say, okay, I'm going to take 1,000, I want to get this over with quick. I want to get back down to my weight in a short period of time so I can go on with my life and go back to what I'm doing. So let's, instead of, if your energy requirement is in that maybe 12 to 1,800 calorie range, and now all of a sudden we take it down to 800 calories. So we're really severely limiting it. Then our body's going to start putting the brakes on. And even when we, maybe if we were successful at it, then, we go back and we're not exercising, that weight comes flying back on. Some people are okay with that. They got past the wedding, right? They got a new dress. They got the wedding over with. I don't care what happens. I'll ride this out for the next 6-8 months and we'll do it again. That's a possibility, but not obviously healthy, because the more people do these yo-yo diets, up, down, up, down, up, down, the more their metabolism or this basal metabolic rate starts to really go down, because, you never know when you're going to starve again. So your body's very apprehensive. So people that have done this chronic dieting tend to have, they do have some difficulty in ultimately losing weight, because their body goes into this starvation mode very quickly. It just, it doesn't trust the person, so to speak. So it doesn't necessarily result in, it's like, so I'm a failure. The other thing that I see happening is, people, in the plant-based world, especially, I'll say, I'm going to eat just fruits and vegetables. They were maybe a junk food eater or a junk food vegan eater, but now I'm going to really, walk the chalk line here. And I'm going to have, oats with spinach in the morning, and I'm going to have a salad for lunch, and I'm going to have, a head of cabbage for dinner type of deal, and, some beans, and that's all I'm going to have. And they get to that meal and it's like, this doesn't look very good. I don't think I'm hungry. So they don't eat. They get to the next meal. Well, I can eat a little bit of this, but it just doesn't taste very good. So I'm not that hungry, so I'm not going to eat. But it gets to the evening and all of a sudden they're starving. And they say, well, I haven't had that much to eat today, so I can have some chips, I can have a little bit of ice cream, because I didn't have anything except, that spinach and, that half a cup of spinach and oatmeal and then half a cup of this. And so they don't like what they have to eat during the day, but then they get so hungry, they can't actually stop and control their caloric intake. And so that can be, something that comes and really gets people and makes achieving, steady weight loss an issue.
Yeah.
And we all remember the good. That's why dietary histories in a lot of diet books are not accurate, because when we ask people what they eat, and I don't care who it is, you just can't remember. If I ask you what, everything you put in your mouth yesterday, you would be, if you were trying the best that you could do, you still be probably 20% off at least. And most people are up there around 40% off, especially when it comes to things that they really know they shouldn't eat. We kind of skirt that under the table a little bit, not maybe, directly, but it's just something we put out of our mind.
Oh, that's true. That is so true. We want to forget it. So diet helps us with controlling our weight, but Pontzer says exercise does everything else. It takes care of your heart, your mind, your immune system. So this was a really powerful study. This is the Cleveland Clinic. It really does do everything else. They've studied over 100,000 patients and found that being unfit on a treadmill in an exercise stress test has a worse prognosis as far as death than hypertension, being a current smoker, and being diabetic. Is there anything you want to add to that interpreting that study?
Well, yes. So if we have people that do a treadmill test and they typically 10 minutes, 12 minutes, which is the exercise capacity of, say, of digging a ditch or shoveling, we can, when we do metabolic equivalents, we can kind of compare how long you can go on a treadmill as to what activity that might be. And so the kind of the benchmark for, adults, say over 50, 10 minutes, they have an excellent prognosis. So even if they have vascular disease, if they can go 10 minutes, they're a pretty good chance that they're going to do okay in the next few years. That is not a license to smoke and eat salt and have poor diabetes. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because ultimately, that was then, but being able to maintain that level of fitness with exercise in the presence of those other three will diminish over time.
Yes.
So we know that people that have diabetes cannot achieve the endurance that someone that doesn't, because they cannot take up energy. When you can't supply your blood, your periphery with blood and nutrients, then high blood pressure will ultimately get you, or get your vascular system, and of course the toxins of cigarette smoke. So yes, that treadmill on Tuesday, the 23rd of whatever, that you went 10 minutes is an excellent prognosis, the prognostic indicator for your next several years. But if you keep doing those things, those other things, the next treadmill won't be near as good.
Mm-hmm. So it's really, you have to do both. You have to have a good diet.
Yeah. You can't, everybody, when people find out I'm a runner, they always bring up Jim Fixx. Jim Fixx was a smoker that started the running movement, and he was exercising, and then he dropped dead of a heart attack on the side of the road. And they said, see, running kills you. Well, he was a smoker, so he did good for a much longer period of time than had he not. But eventually, those things will start to catch up with you. So, yes, it's great. Right then and there, I have a lot of confidence. If somebody comes to me and they're not feeling well, but they can go 10 minutes on a treadmill test, it's like, now I can get these other things under control so that we can improve their longevity. It doesn't mean that, go ahead and smoke and drink and, eat ice cream because you got it under control, because you're going to out-exercise your other bad habits. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't out-exercise your fork. You can't out-exercise these other metabolic problems either in the end.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so if exercise needs to be part of the equation, how do we begin exercising, especially if we're somebody that already has diabetes or heart disease? Are there any things we need to keep in mind as we start adding exercise to our good diet?
Well, yes, the key to any exercise program is being able to do it for a long time. So, if you go out and sign up, it's like, okay, I'm going to start my exercise program. Where do I sign up for the boot camp? And you go out there and somebody puts you through the motions for, an hour and a half. And the next morning you can't get out of bed and you've pulled your Achilles and your back's out of place and, you're done. Right. So, yeah. and then you remember, it's just like eating something bad and then getting sick. It's like, well, every time I try to exercise, I hurt my knees, I hurt my back, so we want to tie it on to, we want to do it in a healthy way and do it in a gradual way that lets our tendons and our joints and everything kind of catch up to our motivation to become healthy again. So, I have people start easy. What are you doing now? And let's add 10% to it. So if you've never been off the couch, then, get up in the morning, lay your clothes out the night before, get up in the morning, walk out 10 minutes, turn around, come back, do that again for the next 7 days. And then, we'll go 15 minutes. What do you like? Women in their 60s and 70s, that was before Title IX, and women weren't allowed to play basketball and play all kinds of sports. And so they may be not interested in sports. So to tell somebody, oh, I want you to go run, or I want you to go to gym, and they've never set foot in the gym, the only thing they know about it is, some over muscled, young guy. I don't want to be there and being intimidated, but I like to dance. So what's your passion? Maybe you want to dance, maybe you want to yoga, maybe you want to do something that we want to use strength several times a week, and we want to increase our heart rate. But we've got to start out in a way that we can do it. Maybe you want to, mix and match. It doesn't have to be, every little thing. When, my daughter was small, I introduced her to a lot of different activities until she settled in on the one that she liked the best, because you're more likely to do something if you enjoy it.
Yeah. Now, I remember you talking about timing of your food, if you were going to exercise, if you had heart disease or diabetes. Are there any things that we need to keep in mind about that?
Right. Certainly, we don't want to eat a big meal and go exercise, because then blood's going to your gut and blood's going to have to go to your muscles. So if your heart's being stressed at rest, now we're putting a double stress on it. So people that have high blood pressure or heart disease, I have them exercise more on a empty stomach, so to speak. If you're going out that 10-minute walk, you're going to be fine without a drink of water. You're going to be fine without, you don't have to carry a water bottle. You don't have to carry, you don't have to eat. And certainly you'd be better off. People that have terrible claudication or cramping in their legs when they walk, or have angina or chest pain, I will tell those people, have a beet about 30 minutes before, have some greens, a handful of raw spinach, because that actually makes nitric oxide, which dilates the blood vessels and gets them primed to exercise. Diabetics tend to have what we call a paradoxical vasoconstriction. So when a non-diabetic goes out to run, your arteries gradually dilate and you get more blood flow to your legs. You feel better. When you first start down the road, everything's a little stiff and you warm up and things get better. But diabetics it can actually get worse before it gets better, because they tend to constrict the blood vessels and actually have less blood vessel. Less blood flow. So easing into it is better for diabetics.
Yeah, that sounds good. So as Pontzer says, keeping your body healthy, which you stressed was really key, and happy and fit, you need to do both of those things. So all three of those things, really. And we just really appreciate you taking the time to talk this through, to interpret this for us and give us the bad news, but also all that wonderful good news. So did you have something you wanted to say, to add to this at the end before we close out?
No, I think it's an excellent book. I know a lot of people were somewhat disappointed that you can't out exercise a poor diet, perhaps, or you can't lose significant weight without exercise. But I think the good news is to be patient. Again, getting rid of some of the fluff and, and starting an exercise program. It's all positive, but small steps in the right direction add up, as opposed to, we can't reverse everything in an hour. So maybe it's a lesson in patience.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and for your knowledge and your wonderful way to explain things. When you explain things, Dr. Dulaney, I get it. So we really appreciate your effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and keep the questions coming.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome.